Foals.
Hello, beautiful people, on this fine Tuesday. Welcome to this episode of the Clutch Down podcast. This is episode 8 now. Lots going on in the world of football, so let's get into it. Now, my bluff this week comes from Rocky in Mexico again. Thank you, my friend. And he says Cam Newton was the first quarterback in history to throw for 35 passing touchdowns and run for 7 rushing touchdowns. So if we look at history, now I know Mike Vick never had any crazy passing seasons. I don't think he ever actually had over 30 touchdowns, or even 4,000 passing yards, I don't think. So I'm going to drop Vick out of the situation. Now, other rushing quarterbacks who are good. Let's go to Steve Mcnair. Yeah, he had an MVP season, but I don't think he had over 30 passing touchdowns in that season. I can't remember what the stats were, but yeah, in an era that was less about passing like it is today, I don't think so. Who else? We got Steve Young. Steve Young was known for being a bit of a better passer as well as having his rushing abilities. So that could be possibly. I don't know enough about his stats to say for definite if he did have it or didn't. So I think the thing is, when you've got people like Tom Brady and Drew Brees having, I think they've had a max of 4 rushing touchdowns in a season, and they were hardly the most agile of players. I'm going to say that any kind of mildly athletic quarterback who has a bit more of a rushing ability, I'm going to say 7 touchdowns isn't too far-fetched. So although I don't know specifically what the statistics are, I'm going to say this one's false, because although Newton did have a great season when he had his MVP season, I just feel like 7 touchdowns is too little to say that another quarterback hasn't done this. So yeah, I'm gonna go false with this one. Yeah! Okay, so it was false. And great. Okay, so Steve Young was actually the first one to do it. And then Cam Newton was second, and then Lamar Jackson was the third person to do it. All right, nice. Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure on Young's stats in terms of if he would have done it or not, but it just seemed way too obvious for it to be Newton, and also seemed like, it's like even with when Kamara had his 6 rushing touchdowns in a game. Like, I was always aware and always presumed that 5 was the most that a player has had. And then all of a sudden it came up that, okay, he's broken the record since 1950, but then back in, I think it was like 1923, a player had 6 rushing touchdowns, so he didn't have the record. So even if it wasn't Steve Young, there could have quite easily been someone from like the pre-Super Bowl era who had 35 passing touchdowns and ran for 7 rushing touchdowns. So yeah, that was a good one. Thanks, Rocky. I appreciate that. That was another good one. Now on to the news and updates for this week. So we finally found out where Stephon Gilmore was signing. He signs a 2-year, $23 million contract with $14 million guaranteed for the Indianapolis Colts. It's a great move by them. Gilmore was drafted by the Bills, and then he signed with the Patriots in 2017, where he won a Super Bowl ring, and he also got a Defensive Player of the Year award. He played in 8 games with Carolina last season, where he had 2 interceptions, so that's a great signing for the Colts, and we finally find out where he was ending up. Talks of him going to the Raiders, talks of him going elsewhere, but yeah, the Colts got him in the end. In other news, the USFL kicked off with some good games this weekend. If you haven't watched them, or you don't want to know any of the scores, then spoiler alert, I'd skip forward about 30-45 seconds from now, because I'm going to go through some of the scores and just quickly chat about the games. So to kick it off, the Birmingham Stallions beat the New Jersey Generals 28-24. This was a great game. They were back and forth throughout. They traded some really nice touchdowns at the start, and it was, really fun to watch. Then moving on, the Houston Gamblers beat the Michigan Panthers 17-12. This was a nice late game comeback by the Panthers, but it wasn't enough in the fourth quarter. There was just some scrappiness by Shea Patterson, some fumbles that could have been avoided, and they just put themselves in too many difficult situations to go and win it. But yeah, another 1-score game. And then the New Orleans Breakers beat the Philadelphia Stars 23-17 in another contest that went back and forth. So yeah, some really good games, really fun games to start off with. I watched the Houston game and the New Orleans game, and they were both really enjoyable. And they've said a lot for the league, and it's just nice to have some football back to watch. So looking forward to the fourth and final game of the first weekend. So this was supposed to be played last night, but it was postponed due to weather issues. And so the Tampa Bay Bandits play the Pittsburgh Maulers at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And in the UK, that will be 12 a.m., so midnight in the UK on Fox Sports 1. That'll do it for the news and updates. And now let's talk about the spotlight players for this week. So on offense, I'm talking about quarterback Desmond Ridder. And then on defense, I'm going to be talking about defensive end Travon Walker, 2 potential first-round picks. So starting with offense, there's Desmond Ridder, 6'3", 211 pounds. He was the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bearcats for 4 years, where he threw over 10,000 yards, 87 touchdowns, and 28 interceptions. In terms of pros, there's a lot of good when it comes to Ridder. So when he keeps his feet set, he throws some absolute darts, whether that's out to the flats, if that's intermediate, if he's throwing deep, he just throws some beautiful passes and seems really poised and relaxed in the pocket. He's a senior, so he played all 4 years at college, which means I think he's going to be a very suitable leader for a team that needs a quarterback, and he can probably take on that starting role quite quickly because of that and because of the decision making he's already achieved by developing a lot at college and playing all of his years. I think he's very good at going through reads calmly, even when he's pressured. And when he goes through his reads, he trusts his decision and arm and hits the open receiver. I watched a few bits of his tape, and there was a lot of situations where he kind of scanned the field, come back to the read that was open, or he'd go across or look off defenders and he'd come back to the read that was open and then just throw a really, really nice ball to his receiver or try and throw receivers open a lot of the time. So yeah, beautiful deep ball, some really, really nice deep shots. He has no trouble throwing downfield, which is going to be really handy when it comes to the NFL. And not just about his throwing, but he can run and he protects himself when he does too. He doesn't force the extra yards, which you sometimes see with players coming from college to the NFL. They try and get those extra yards every time and put themselves into positions where they could injure themselves, especially these days where dual threat quarterbacks are the norm or the preference. And so if you can get a quarterback who can throw well and can run when he needs to, has the athleticism to run when he needs to, but doesn't force extra yards and put himself into any kind of injury concerning positions, and that's great. On to the cons. He can sort of be weirdly and erratically inaccurate. Even when he's not under pressure, he'll go from throwing these beautiful deep shots like 30-40 yards down the field, and then all of a sudden he'll overthrow someone 2 yards downfield in a curl route, or he's thrown to the flats and he overthrows his running back and just throws it straight out, which is really strange. And at least he's very erratic in his decision making because of that. Like sometimes makes incredible decisions, scans the field, comes back, goes through the right reads and so on. And then sometimes he'll just sort of throw for the sake of throwing or run for the sake of running. There's a bit of indecisiveness there in terms of the actual decision making on a play-to-play basis versus when he does go through his reads calmly. He seems to follow a process sometimes, and the other times he's just kind of all over the place. And this leads to, well, sometimes leads to, but sometimes it just seems like on early downs especially, he has a tendency to stare down receivers. I'm not sure if this was an element of play calling as well, where you've got design plays of, all right, okay, we're going to throw a quick pass to a slant straight off the bat, or he's reading a safety or reading a corner or a linebacker and he throws it. But it just seems like he predetermines and throws. And it's frustrating because when he looks off defenders and seems to go through his process, he's very accurate. He's just very inconsistent. And as I said, I noticed it watching his film on early downs especially. He seems to get more comfortable and make better decisions when he's forced to throw either intermediate or deep. It's like that decision between throwing deep and throwing a check down he struggles with. And then he'll kind of force it to the check down for the sake of forcing it, rather than just throwing it away or going for that short rush that's going to get you 2 yards and sliding. Like, I think he just needs to tighten that up. And this leads to what my prediction is actually. Because I think you need to pair him. I think the leadership and the fundamentals that he has, the size he has, the ability to be a leader, I think you need to just pair him with a more experienced head coach. Like I said with Malik Willis, you need to pair him with an experienced head coach who's worked with a young quarterback before, who needs a leader in their organization to change things. And so my prediction is he goes to the Steelers with the Steelers' first pick in the draft. I think it's great for the Steelers. I think that Trubisky is going to be a good quarterback to just cover things off for a while. And I think he's had some time to sit. He's had some success starting. He's a veteran now. And I think the fact that Trubisky also has that running ability is going to be good for Ridder to sit behind. And although Trubisky isn't the best quarterback of all time, you can still teach. If you're a veteran and have had success in the league and you've played more than one season as a quarterback in the league, then you have some good experience to impart onto a rookie. And I think also with the Steelers, with sometimes the things you had like last year with Chase Claypool, where he was not really taking accountability on that fourth down play where he didn't get the ball off and they didn't have the time to complete that comeback against the Vikings, obviously with everything that's happened with Dwayne Haskins. And they, in those situations, players look to someone who can lead and who can and have a positive effect. I think the way that Trubisky's handled everything has been very professional and very, very... He's been a very good leader through the past few weeks in what's been a tragic event for the Steelers. And so I think for someone like Ridder to come in and have the chance to learn under a great coach and sit for a while, I think the Steelers will grab a really, really good quarterback there who, maybe he won't be the best of all time and break records, but he might be a really, really good and serviceable quarterback for 10, 15 years in the league. And I think the fact that there's that leadership there already, I think you've got someone with a really, really good mindset who will be an asset to your team. Now moving on to defense, let's talk about Travon Walker. So Walker's a defensive end for the Georgia Bulldogs, who won the national championship last year. He's 6'5", 275 pounds, and he became the starter in his junior year where he had 37 tackles, 6 sacks, and then also 2 passes defensed. Pros, the main thing I see when I watch Walker's tape is that he's an amazing athlete. For context on his size and his speed, he's bigger and heavier than Khalil Mack, and he ran a faster 40 time than DeAndre Hopkins did. He ran a 4:51.40 at that size, which is just insane, almost inhuman, I'd say at this point. Because of that, because of his size, he has such a big reach that even if he doesn't get the sack, he can disrupt the quarterback. And this is great because it can knock the quarterback off rhythm and then lead to pass breakups in the secondary. If you can knock a quarterback out of their throwing motion or knock their hips off so they can't get their feet set, then you're looking at interceptions in the secondary, pass breakups, inaccurate passes that are thrown outside, and just his presence and his reach from where it's almost like he can sack the quarterback or attempt to sack the quarterback from about 30 feet away. So that's going to be really good for defenses. I think he's very underrated in the run game as well. One thing I noticed about Thibodeau is he doesn't stay awfully disciplined in his gaps in the run, whereas it seems like Walker stays very disciplined. If he's meant to cover the inside and cover the cutback, he does. If he's meant to stop the outside and stay at the edge, he'll stay at the edge. And it's just, very, very good. Very good discipline, which is I think an underrated part of his game that's not really spoken about. You speak about how good of an athlete he is, but some of his fundamentals and his skills in terms of actual pass rushing and tackling and defending in the run kind of go unnoticed. And he makes some really good tackles in the run game or plays really well in the run game sometimes. As a 1 year starter in college is, I think, excellent. Also with his power, he can just overpower his linemen through pure strength, which means he can naturally draw double teams. So the second you put him on the field, teams pay attention to him and they go, all right, Walker's over there, we're going to have to double team him. He's just too strong and too big to just leave him on his own. And so to have that presence on the field for a defense is really, really helpful. On to cons, he's not the most technical. He doesn't have as many pass rush actual moves like Hutchinson or Thibodeau. He uses his pure power a lot of the time, as I said, to overpower linemen. And that's great if it works. But that's not always going to work. So you need the skill set to be able to alternate. Go, all right, okay, I'm noticing that offensive tackle does this, so I need to use this move to break out against that tendency, rather than just sort of run every single time and hope for the best. And on the back of that, he only has a year of full tape from being a year as a starter. So you're seeing all these amazing, overpowering abilities and size from him. But there's just not a lot to kind of watch. And if you're going to go for picking someone in the first round, you need a bit more time to just actually see what they've got with them. Like, can you just pick a player off pure size and strength alone? Or do you need a bit more than a year of full tape as a starter to go on? Also, not the most successful in beating blocks, like in pass rushing. And I think that's obviously because he's limited by his lack of diverse moves. I don't think he's a game wrecker, or at least to start off with, won't be a game wrecker. He'll be just a very, very good depth guy with huge upside. And I think the good thing, at least about him, because of his size, is he'll stay in the quarterback's mind. So he's not going to be a constant game wrecker, but the quarterback's going to notice when you put him on the field, even as a rookie. There's also an argument that maybe he's just the sum of his parts on a Georgia defense that had Jordan Davis and Devonta Wyatt, who both could be first rounders this year. So maybe, I watched their championship game against Alabama, and they just seem to be getting constant pressure no matter what. So maybe it's just a case of because he was on that defense, that's why he looks so good. My prediction, though, I still think he goes very high in the first. I think the Jets take him at pick 4. I think when you pair him with Robert Saleh, I think Saleh can develop him. He's worked with Nick Bosa in his rookie season, and that San Francisco defense that always seem to be sacking the quarterbacks every single week. And I think Robert Saleh will find a way to unlock him. Start him off by getting used to rushing on third down, and then develop his run game and his run defense to use him on all downs. As I said, he's an underrated run defender. I think it's a reach. I think he should really go past pick 10. And I think the Jets could get him at their pick, which is 11, I believe. I think they could get him there, but I think just because of his size and what he has shown on tape, I think he's done enough to be taken high. And I think Saleh will think the same. I think he'll just go, there's a freak of nature like this doesn't come around often, so I'm willing to take the chance on him and try to develop him and develop his moves rather than see him slip down the board and someone get a massive steal. So yeah, prediction is the Jets take him at number 4. Moving on to plays of the week. My plays of the week this week are actually from the USFL. Some of the opening plays in that first game of Birmingham versus New Jersey were just great. They were so much fun. My first play is the first play ever in the USFL, and it was incredible. So 1st and 10, start off the first quarter, nice play action play, and then quarterback Luis Perez hits Randy Satterfield for 49 yards on the right side of the field. Literally the first play of the game, first play of the new season, launches it down 49 yards, and Satterfield makes a beautiful catch. It just seemed like such a poetic and lovely way to start it off. That people are tuning in and going, oh, what's this strange spring league? What's going on? Let me have a look. And then they see that pass and go, okay, I see what we're doing here. I see what's happening here. Great. And then on that same drive, 1st and goal, after they converted a 4th down, another play action, Perez hits Satterfield again in the end zone for a touchdown. So they were both just really nice plays on the first drive from New Jersey. And then what I like next is that Birmingham strikes back on the next drive. So 1st and 10 at the 35-yard line. Quarterback Alex Magoo hits Osiris Mitchell on a lovely deep shot for the touchdown in the end zone. So then it was 7-7 and the game went back and forth like that until the end. There's just a few really cool plays to open it up and some really nice touchdowns to open it up. And as I said, anyone who was just tuning in and trying to figure out what was going on just saw some really, really nice plays to open it. Really happy that the USFL is doing well. And really looking forward to watching the rest of the season and watching the game later as well. So I think on the topic of the USFL, let's move on to our controversies for the week. And I want to chat a bit about the USFL. So I was really impressed by it, to be honest. I found the games really entertaining. I think there's a certain element with the NFL and even with college football that you like it not just because it's American football and it's football and you're watching it. It's also because you have a certain attachment to the players, like some of the players. And in the NFL, you get your favorite players after a while, and that kind of drives why you watch certain teams or why you care about certain teams and certain plays and so on. And I think so far the USFL is very raw because you're watching it basically for the diehard being a fan of football. And the fact that there were so many close games to start off with and good plays and good defense just really does it justice. I think that as the weeks go on, the games are going to improve and we're going to start to see some stars coming through. Like I saw some good plays from some ex-NFL guys like Sharif Miller and TJ Logan had a really good game. And it's good to see them getting another chance. But I just think that with only having 3 weeks to prepare for these games, I think they're just going to improve and get better and better as the weeks go on. And it's just really, really cool to have more football now. It's such a long off season with the NFL. Like, even chatting now to you guys on this podcast, like, I've done the whole thing for the off season, and this is episode 8 now. So that's 8 weeks talking about the NFL in the off season, and we're getting to the draft, which makes things more exciting, but we're still very far away from the season. And so it's just nice to have football to watch in the meantime. Going back to the NFL, let's talk a bit about Baker Mayfield. So there's potential that Baker's going to end up with the Panthers. I think this is a very good move. I think Baker going to a Browns team which was absolutely awful and won 0 games, and going there as the first overall pick and changing that team, not just him, but having the effect of changing that team into a playoff team, and then also a playoff team that won a playoff game. I think he showed that he can play in the league. I mean, he played pretty well considering last season, the injury he had to his shoulder. He still played, I'd say, better than Sam Darnold or Cam Newton, so it's a definite improvement at quarterback for them. And I think it's just a good position for him to go to. Like, the Panthers aren't terrible. They need to improve in places. You know, I'm still unsure on Matt Rule as a coach, but he'll have some good receivers to throw to. He's got some good running backs. He's got some good pieces on defense. So I think between that, I think it's a good situation. I'm not sure if any team's actually going to trade for Baker. The Browns have kind of cashed their chips in getting Watson and not sending Baker anywhere before they got Watson, because now teams know that he's going to be cut. So I'd imagine they're probably just going to wait for him to be cut rather than say, all right, let's give up a draft pick now, because you can't keep, I think what you've got, is it Mayfield, Josh Dobbs, then you've also got who's the old Colts squad? Jacoby Brissett. He's there as well. And then, so yeah, Watson, Mayfield, Brissett, and Josh Dobbs. You can't keep all of those quarterbacks. And they only just signed Dobbs and Brissett recently. So they know that Baker Mayfield has to go. So why give up a pick for him when you can just wait for him to be released and then sign him instead? I think continuing talking about the Mayfield context as well, Robbie Anderson had some things to say, the Carolina receiver. So on an Insta account called The Panthers Way, they posted an image of Baker Mayfield saying he's most likely to get signed by the Panthers, to which Robbie commented no on there underneath. There's been talks about this. I just think it's unprofessional. I think Baker is a big improvement at quarterback, and considering Robbie's had only one 1,000-yard season, he's not really got any place to talk about the mediocrity of anywhere else. I think Anderson's an underrated player, but I just think this isn't the way to go about it, especially when you've had Sam Darnold thrown at you for a season. There's an argument to say that, Anderson's never had a good quarterback, but, you look at someone like DeAndre Hopkins, put up regular 1,000-yard seasons before Watson was drafted with an assortment of quarterbacks. Then Brandon Cooks last year put up 1,000 yards jumping between Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills at quarterbacks. And even if you just look at the Panthers, DJ Moore put up 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons with Kyle Allen, then Teddy Bridgewater, and then a mix of Sam Darnold and Cam Newton at quarterback. So even in the same situation. And then if you want to hate me and break that down further, last year, Samuel Moore gets more targets. So Moore had 163 targets last season. Anderson had 110 targets last season. That's 1.5 more targets for Moore. That means if you just times Anderson's yards by that, he would have had just under 800 with the same targets. And if you look at that and go, well, that's still 53 more targets. Kyle Pitts and T. Higgins both had the same amount of targets and had over 1,000 yards. So really, there's no excuse. And I think it's just like, as a team, that's not a person that you want to be on your team. There's nothing wrong with being vocal, but there's just a way you handle things. And if you're an NFL player commenting something like that on the internet, on an Instagram post or tweeting something that people are going to talk about, and it's going to cause controversy. And now you're taking that attention away from your team and the draft and the needs and what they could possibly do and putting it on you. And I just think it's a very unprofessional way of handling it. Whatever way you feel about Mayfield, you want to create an environment where he's going to go, all right, well, I want to go to a new team. Okay, I'm getting traded to the Panthers. Let's try and make it work. And you try and make it work as a sports person and as a teammate. So yeah, I wasn't really a fan of the way he handled that. And I'm interested to see where Mayfield goes. The Panthers seems like a very good move for them. There was obviously talks before about him going to the Colts, but then they signed Ryan. So the Panthers, I think, will be good for him, but I just think Anderson needs to say something about it, and I think it's a bit of a selfish move. So I'd like to see some sort of recompense there, but we'll see what happens with that. Okay, so that's all the NFL talk done for this episode. So now let's chat about my album of the week. So my album of the week this week is Foals, What Went Down. So Foals are a British rock band from Oxford, and this album came out in 2015. I've liked different songs of theirs over the years, but when you get those artists that you listen to, and over the years they appear in different playlists, and you like their songs, but you never actually dive into any of the discography or listen to them properly. So I thought, I'll give them a go. I've got a couple of friends who really like this album, and so I thought, I'll give it a go. Absolutely loved it. It's very funky. It's got some very upbeat songs. I say the lyrics are good. The songs are good. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend. My favourite songs from it are What Went Down, which is the first song from the album. And then Daffodils, the B-side, which you can find by checking it out on Spotify. It's just a really, really funky song. You can't help but kind of do a little shoulder shimmy, get into the song when you listen to it. And that is what I like from an album. I like a bit of danceability from an album. Love my rock, but I love a bit of danceability, and this has got that. So yeah, Foals, What Went Down, give that a check out. Okay, beautiful people, thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please rate it on Spotify and share it with friends. If you share it on Instagram, tag me in it. My handle is @ClutchdownPodcast. Tune in next time because I'll be doing my mock picks for every team in the first round of the upcoming NFL draft, so it's going to be a fun one. Catch you next week.
Mold.